When nostalgia and sentimental value are combined, the effect can be powerful. Do you still have the game you played the most when you were a kid? Do you have the original controller you used back then? Most retro video game consoles were built like tanks. All they really need is a capacitor replacement, and most of them will be good to go for another 30 years. My modest game room is filled with consoles, upscalers, controllers, professional video monitors, and of course, physical games. Most of my collection contains hardware and games that I just genuinely like. I don't really collect just to collect. My game room was full of consoles and games that I have memories with. Hey everyone, Travis Bowman here. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player and retro video game nerd. Let's take a look at some of the retro video game hardware that I promised myself I would never sell. We've got a lot of consoles to look at, but we've got some weird stuff to see as well. This is going to be a great discussion video. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this stuff as we go along. I'd also love to know which item from your collection that you would never sell. So let's jump into it. The Sega Genesis Nomad is a very cool piece of technology. It represents a time when Sega was Sega. Bold, innovative, and just flat out bizarre. That's the Sega we know and love, and quite frankly, miss. The Nomad was released in North America only in October of 1995, and it was originally sold for about $180. For some reason, the Genesis was extremely popular in North America, and it made sense for them to try and capitalize on that popularity even though the 32X and Sega Saturn were already on the market. The Nomad is essentially a handheld Sega Genesis with some other really unique features. In addition to playing the Sega Genesis library in handheld mode with this really nice 6-button layout and unique D-pad, you can also hook this up to your television and play it that way, with the second player port on the bottom of the console being the icing on the nostalgia cake. Although the Genesis was my very first video game console, I was too young to remember the Nomad, and I didn't get it until many years later. In fact, one of my first retro video game inspired YouTube videos was on the Nomad, and I titled it The Switch of the 90s, and I think that describes it pretty perfectly. Since then, I've jumped into various flash carts, battery pack, and screen mods for this thing. I can now play the entire Sega CD library as well as the Genesis library on this handheld with a beautiful, bright, and crisp display. And I don't have to worry about draining several AA batteries to do so anymore thanks to this 3D printed battery pack containing 2 heavy-duty lithium rechargeable batteries. I picked this up a few years before the 2020 pandemic on a Facebook Marketplace score. Apparently, it had been sitting in somebody's closet since the late 90s. I paid them a $100 bill for it. I will never sell this Sega Nomad for many reasons. First of all, it's pretty freaking awesome, and it's a relic of what video games used to be. They took chances, they innovated, and they weren't afraid to be weird. Second, there's just no way that I could ever purchase this again for $100. These days, the Nomad is going up to the hundreds of dollars price range. It's a cool piece of gaming history, but it's just not worth that much money. And finally, I won't sell it because I actually still use it. Instead of turning on my TV, upscaler, and console, and stereo system to play a game for half an hour, I can just flip one switch on the Nomad and play that way. It's actually really convenient. When I'm waiting for a YouTube video to render in my editing software, I'll often reach for either my Game Boy Advance or the Nomad. I've got several other YouTube videos just about the Sega Nomad if you're interested in checking that out. What do you guys think about the Sega Nomad? Have you ever had your hands on one of these before? If my game room was a living, breathing, and thinking being, then the RetroTink 4K would be both the brain and the heart. This ungodly expensive upscaler was unleashed onto the world in December of 2023, and at first, I just laughed at the $750 price tag. There's no freaking way that an upscaler for retro video game consoles should cost that much. And then I started to look into the features. 240p to 4K upscaling, HDMI upscaling, motion adaptive deinterlacing, full HDR support, unlimited custom profiles, and pretty much every scanline option known to man. And that's just the gist of it. This thing is really the best upscaler that money can buy, so after pretending that not having it in my possession wasn't bothering me, I made a deal with myself. I knew that I wouldn't just use this for enjoyment and entertainment. This is a great device for capturing game footage for both streaming and mainline YouTube content. So I took a lot of things out of my game room that just no longer sparked joy and bought the RetroTink 4K. This is by far the most used item that I'll feature in this video, and it's probably the most used piece of hardware in my entire game room. If I'm playing retro video games in my game room, then I'm using the RetroTink 4K to do so. The name Tink resonates with me very much. My girlfriend will attest to this. Sometimes I just can't leave things alone. I'll move furniture around just to see if it quote-unquote looks better. The RetroTink 4K is pretty perfect for somebody like me. I have nearly 30 video game consoles, both modern and retro, but mostly retro. Every console that I own is supported by the RetroTink 4K with various profiles to tinker with right out of the box. I'll never sell this RetroTink 4K because it's just too vital for my setup and my YouTube channel. Anytime you see any gameplay footage on my channel, it's from the RetroTink 4K. I made a huge investment into this device, and I honestly believe it will never be topped. But even if it is, I don't really care. RetroTink devices are supported long after initial release, and we're getting firmware updates all the time. If you're interested in the RetroTink line of video upscalers but don't want to spend nearly $1,000, I highly recommend looking into the RetroTink 2X, RetroTink 5X, and the RetroTink 4K CE. So what do you guys think? Would you ever drop that kind of money just for a video upscaler? I have the YouTube channel My Life in Gaming to thank for cursing me with the knowledge of PVMs existing. I got my first PVM in 2019, and since then I've owned a total of 4 at one time. This Olympus OEV203 sits front and center in my game room, and if I'm playing something on a CRT, this is my display of choice. I've got an entire video all about CRTs and PVMs, so I won't go into much detail here. But I will say that I got extremely lucky when I found this PVM on the Facebook Marketplace. Before I found it, I was sure that I'd never find one, but there it was. The guy that was selling it pretty much grabbed it for free from his place of work. He worked at a hospital. And this was an old medical monitor that was going to be thrown away, but he grabbed it before it was tossed. He sold it to me for about $300, I think. I'm pretty sure he was asking $500 or $600 for it, but I was the only one messaging him about it. I'm also a huge bartering guy, and haggling is extremely fun for somebody like me. I made him an offer, and since no one else was interested in it at the time, he accepted. The perks of living in Central Arkansas, I guess. This PVM is capable of 240p and 480i only, so no progressive scan, aka 480p on your Xbox, Dreamcast, or GameCube, which is really a damn shame. I've been actively searching for what's called a multi-format PVM for years, and I've always come up short. Those monitors are increasingly difficult to find, and if you do find them, you're likely going to have to pay a lot of money for it. The obvious reason why I won't sell this PVM is because it's just too rare and hard to find. If there's one thing I wouldn't be able to find again after selling it, it would be a PVM like this one. If we're comparing my game room to a living thing again, this PVM would be some sort of organ like a kidney or something. Have any of you had the chance to own or see retro games on a PVM? Oh, and by the way, I put a link to the CRT video in the description below, and you should definitely check out that video after you've watched this one. I put a lot of time, research, and effort into it, and I'm pretty proud of the way that it turned out. The Sega Genesis was my very first console, and unfortunately I don't have my original Genesis from my childhood, or maybe I do? This is a phenomenon that I think about a little too often. Check this out. I'm from a very small town, and there are less than 10 video game stores in my immediate area. I don't remember selling my childhood Genesis and games, but I know that it happened. Years later, I jumped into collecting retro systems around 2014 or so. I bought this Genesis Model 2 from a guy about 15 miles away from me. This very well could be the same Genesis from my childhood. Every console, game, or book has a story to tell, but unfortunately for us, they can't speak. So there's no telling where my original Genesis is now, but it might be right here in front of me. I'll never know, and I'm embarrassed to admit that it kind of bothers me just a little bit, but the odds of finding this out for sure aren't exactly in my favor. Because I'll never know if I have my original Genesis or not, I decided to start fresh with something I never had as a kid. The Model 1 Sega Genesis and Sega CD. If you couldn't tell already, I'm a huge fan of Sega hardware, and this combination is by far the most iconic. At least it is in North America anyways. Collecting Genesis games is becoming quite difficult unless you're a rich man, and I've completely given up on collecting Sega CD games. Still, the hardware is just too cool, and a buddy of mine did some work on this Model 1 Sega CD, so it should be good to go for years to come. I used to burn games on a CDR for it, but since then I've upgraded to the Mega EverDrive Pro, which can play Sega CD games from the cartridge. If you're familiar with that flash cart, then you'll know that you can't play Sega CD games on the cart if a real Sega CD is attached to the console, so that add-on is just for show for now. The reason I can't bring myself to sell the Sega CD is because I know I'll probably never find another one at a decent price again. It's part of Sega's history, and I'm proud to own some of that history. Now let's take a look at some high-dollar items that I honestly thought I never would own. The Neo Geo is by far one of the most expensive video game consoles out there, and I've managed to get two flavors of these consoles, the AES and the CD system. I found a decent Neo Geo CD auction on eBay years ago, and I got lucky. I think I paid about $200 for the console, original power supply, and 2 controllers. Since then, I had my buddy mod it with the Neo SD loader, which plays every game from an SD card. The Neo Geo CD is one of my favorite consoles in my collection just because it's so freaking cool. The AES is one of the most coveted consoles in all of video gaming. I was in the mood to try to hunt one down, and I found this one on eBay as well. The shell had been broken down the middle, and I'm pretty sure the guy JB welded it back together, but to his credit, the system managed to survive shipping long enough to make it to me. I think he initially had it for sale for about $500, but I made him a ridiculous offer on it. He must have been pretty desperate to sell because he accepted without a counter offer. I've had the console recapped and properly RGB modified, and it's been in my collection front and center ever since. A theme for my game room that I've always implemented is access. I obviously can't afford to start a Neo Geo game collection. There are few people that can, but I want access to every Neo Geo game on original hardware if it's possible. That's why I invested in the Neo SD flash cart and the Neo SD loader. I have every Neo Geo game accessible to me on both consoles, and I'm a happy guy as a result. I won't sell these consoles because finding them again is impossible. At least it would be for the prices that I paid for them. I do not see myself getting that lucky again. Does anyone here have a Neo Geo console in their game room? You might be very surprised to see a regular old NES in this video. These things are still pretty common and you can find them pretty easily in most used game stores, so why is it here? Because I made a promise to never sell it. This console used to belong to one of my neighbors. You guys have any neighbors that you've lived next to for years and become really close to? These people have been good neighbors to me and my family since the year 2001. The neighbors in question are a male and female that are married, and I used to go down there and hang out with them before they had kids. They would go out to flea markets and pawn shops and swing by the house when I was a teenager to ask me if I wanted to come along, and I always did, every single time. We made a lot of great memories together, and I really appreciated them for being so kind to me over the years. And they have 3 kids of their own now. Their oldest, who I remember holding in my hands as a tiny infant baby, is now 21 years old. Yikes, man. It sucks getting old. The female neighbor let me have her NES as long as I promised to never sell it. This is her childhood NES that she played the original Mario on back in the late 80s and early 90s. I fixed it up, had an RGB mod done on it not too long ago, and it's still in my game room fitted with an EverDrive cartridge, and it's going to be ready to play for years to come. Thank you so much, Dusty and Monica, for being so kind to me over the years and for giving me a piece of your childhood for safekeeping. It will be well loved and well taken care of for years to come. The Sega Saturn is one of history's most misunderstood consoles. This is a console that most everyone says that they've never played and never knew anyone that had one back in the day. The Sony PlayStation really took the gaming world by storm and left all of the competitors in the dust. The Sega Saturn is a 2D powerhouse, and it gave us some of the best platformers, beat-em-ups, and shooters ever made. I'll never sell my Sega Saturn because over the years, it became the ultimate console to visit for the first time, because I was entirely unaware of basically any game on this system. Playing them for the first time was incredibly exciting. Ironically, the Saturn became my nostalgia box. Although I had no nostalgia for the system or its games, reaching into it was like opening a present that Santa forgot to give me back in the 90s. I never knew of this console existing back in the day, but thanks to ODEs such as the Finrear, now I can play the entire Saturn library. One of the best parts about retro video games is experiencing new to you games for the first time. Guardian Heroes is a true gem on this console, and when I introduced my childhood best friend to it, we ended up playing it for hours just like we would have if we had it back in the day. The Sega Saturn was a colossal failure in the United States at the time, and this is probably because of Sega releasing the competing hardware that was the 32X at the same time, and the fact that the original PlayStation was so focused on 3D gaming. The Saturn just couldn't do 3D games as good as the PlayStation, and no one wanted to play 2D games anymore. However, the Saturn was a huge hit in Japan. We only got around 250 games released in North America, but in Japan, there were over 1,000 games released. Thanks to the modding community, we now have access to these games with fan translations and hacks breathing even more new life into this console. For a long time, Saturn emulation was notoriously difficult, meaning that the only way to experience the library of games was on a legitimate Saturn console. I can't sell this because of the joy that it's brought me over the years. There will be a new translation coming out that I surely will not want to miss. If you've never played the Sega Saturn, you're missing out. If you're a fan of my channel, then you knew this was coming. The Sega Dreamcast is my favorite video game system of all time. This is the only system that I've kept from my childhood, and for that reason alone, I'll never sell it. The disk drive went bad and stopped reading games, so I replaced it with the GDMU. This is a device that allows you to read games from an SD card instead of the disk drive. I've made more YouTube videos about the Sega Dreamcast more than any other console, and I remember convincing my mom to let me open it up a few days before Christmas, and it was the best Christmas ever. I also remember her buying me Toy Commander and Phantasy Star Online at Walmart during a grocery shopping run. I still play these games today from time to time, and I even still play Phantasy Star Online actually online. It's incredibly easy to do so, and I've got a few videos on that subject if you're interested in doing the same thing yourself. More importantly, I've managed to get 2 Dreamcasts online in my house, and my girlfriend Emily has been playing Phantasy Star Online with me. One of the best ways to show love to someone is to share something special with them. The best part about all this nostalgic stuff from my childhood is getting to share it with someone that's never experienced it before. Games on this system are timeless, and most of them still hold up quite well today. Jet Grind Radio is one of the only games that I've had since my childhood, and selling it would flat out break my heart. These are all just a few things from my game room that I feel as though I could never sell. If you're interested in seeing more, I highly recommend checking out my game room tour video on my channel. The link to that will be in the description below. I'm really curious to hear from all of you guys. What system is your favorite? Do you have any games from your childhood that you'll never sell? What's the oldest game in your collection that you've held on to for all of these years? Let me know the answers to all those questions in the comments section below. Also, feel free to join my free Discord server to link up with fellow retro video game nerds. There's a section for CRTs, getting your Sega Dreamcast back online, and a lot more. If you like this video, I think you'll feel right at home with all of us there in Discord. Thank you so much for watching, thank you for subscribing, and I'll catch you guys at the next video. Bye-bye.